Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 122nd of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Benjamin Baumhauer, also known as Bind, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry about that. He's a freelance digital artist and illustrator and product design teacher from Stuttgart, Germany. Now, with that quick introduction out of the way, let's just jump into the first question that I ask everyone. Give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having me. Um, it's I'm one of these guys, I guess, who got into the whole drawing thing as a kid, like really early. I was like, I remember when I was in kindergarten, the teacher would contact my parents and say, like, would be like amazed. Oh, look what your son has done. He couldn't like fathom a kid at that age drawing well because it doesn't happen a lot. But for me, it was like my parents would sit down with me and show me do cardboard folding stuff and drawing all kinds of colors and that and somehow it spoke to me like very early on. So I have a I think I'm a naturally patient guy. So when I was like 8 years old, 9 years old, I was doing for a school, project. I was like drawing 100 dinosaur pictures. And you cannot usually bring a kid to draw 100 of anything, be consistent like that. But somehow it works for me. Somehow I could always, get lost and then just sit there and keep drawing forever. And then of course when I became a teenager, it was the whole that was in the 90s, and it was the whole comic stuff, and now we have Japanese comics and American comics, and we have Spider-Man, and we have um, Appleseed and Akira and all this Japanese stuff, and you would want to emulate that. So I would try to draw comics in my teens, which of course going there, jumping into that cold water is really hard to do. So you're confronted with all that stuff that you cannot do. So drawing in perspective, oh shit, can't do that. So you would like copy the characters from famous comic artists and basically go from there. So that's how I got into it.
Oh, pretty interesting. And might I ask, what were some of your, favorite comic books that you really enjoyed when you were a kid in the 90s? I think, as you said.
Yeah. So there's not a lot because I'm not a comic fan, and I don't read comics nowadays. I didn't read comics maybe for 20 years. So it was really for me a teenage thing. So uh, I um, I remember guys like James O'Barr who did The Crow. I remember guys like Akira Toriyama, the Japanese guys. What is what's the author of Appleseed? Um,
I don't know.
Masamune Shiro. Yeah. So guys like that, they would like they already had the cyberpunk, the sci-fi figured out. They were drawing that, and that I like that of the Japanese style comics. And what I liked is that they had their own style, because if I look at the Japanese style, like the past 20 years, it's becoming really generic. So of course you have still guys like Akira Toriyama. They stick around. They still work. They still have their own style, and you can distinguish it. But a lot of stuff, because you now getting flooded with that anime stuff and all of that, and a lot of stuff really looks like it's coming out of a factory at, to me at least, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, see that. And speaking of, let's flash forward some years later, all right? When you were in high school, or maybe, during your teenagers, you were probably at some point, your parents and teachers had to start having the talk with you that, all right, you need to think for your future and just think what job you want to go have and specialize in some stuff like that. So my question is, were you originally studying art and design, or you were pursuing another career path like in the beginning?
No, 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 no. I think because I'm from Germany, and in Germany we don't have that entertainment industry. Is not, especially like in the early 2000s. It was not that big. You know, you're not just becoming a comic artist, or you're not just joining a game studio in Germany in the 2000s. That's like doesn't happen. You know, that's not. You have to go abroad to do that. So I couldn't do that, and of course, yeah, so there was no real chance of doing that, and also I would not know how to do it, because even when I was 20, I didn't know anything about, um, drama, or layout, how to design stuff other than just drawing it. Because if you want to be a comic artist, you need to be good at layouting, you need to be good at writing, you need to be good at in a sense graphic design. So you're not just doing that, and unless you're doing naive comics, very childish stuff. But if you want to do high level stuff, you not only need to be good at drawing, but also at layouting, and all the other stuff. So originally I did not, I wanted to go to art school, and and that was hard, because in a good art school in Germany, at least at the time, in Stuttgart, it was a state art school. And this art school would give you a real degree, not like a private school where you go there, you pay money, and then, they give you like a bullshit certificate that you attended it. And that in the US, this is kind of intertwined with a degree. But in Germany, that's not the case. You either get a real degree or you have a fake degree. So, and of course, getting into a school where you can get a real degree is really hard, because they have like 20 places, but 500 people signing up for those places, so you need to present the portfolio, and then you need to do examination, and I did that, and then they rejected me the first year. So I had to think, do I really want to do that? So I studied some other stuff in between, keep me busy, and then reapplied the next year, and then I got in, and then I started to study communication design, like graphic design. So that's my major. I'm a graphic designer.
Hmm. That's interesting. That's like one of those major cliches you see in different artists when they, at first, just for the sake of like having a better stable future in terms of income and stuff like that, they first, encounter with graphic design first, then they enter it and they realize, oh, it's not that much fulfilling. So then they actually start learning the fundamentals of art, and some of them might become concept artists, some of them go to 3D, but it starts with the notion of like having a stability. But and we're actually like so lucky to be living in this age right now, that the entertainment industry has never been, it's bigger than ever, and there's so many opportunities for anyone to learn everything from internet. And just like sometimes you have to pause and take it like a moment and think about this stuff. Even just 10 years ago it wasn't like this that much.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because when I started studying in Stuttgart, it was in 2005. So that's more than 10 years ago. And it was, I don't know how it is now, but I imagine it was different. So one thing I remember is that, because I wanted to be an artist, right? So the first year I signed up not even for graphic design. I signed up for fine arts, and they would reject me. They would say, "Yeah, your portfolio is good. We accept your portfolio." But then I had an oral exam, and then I somehow failed that. And they don't tell you why you failed that, you just failed. So next year I came back, and I did some reconsidering, and I said, it's hard to be an artist. It's hard to make any money of being a fine artist. So why not try get into graphic design? And if you can't be an artist, at least you know how to do something else. So that was kind of my thinking at the time. And yeah, I think it was a good decision. I learned a lot of shit that I couldn't do, like typography and layouting, and all of that, photography, which I had no clue about. I was just good at drawing and nothing else, basically.
That's pretty interesting. No, I was just thinking while you were speaking. You said you started like your study in graphic design in Stuttgart in 2005. And just for reference, I was 8 years old back then. Like, just when you think about this stuff, man.
Right. Yeah. I, yeah. It's and I was not even that young then. To be
Mm,
honest with you, I'm 40 now, so I was in my mid 20s. Um, but I remember one thing, and that is might be really shocking. So, in terms of where the industry was at that time, um, I was consuming back then already. I was into comics before, and then I was into I liked the video games and game art and all of that, and then of course the movies and stuff. And then I was like, shit, who designs all this stuff? And I was in university. I was getting in contact with some of those guys, because there's some Germans like Hans Hillmann. They did, which are really old guys, very old school guys, but they did concept art basically for Hitchcock movies, like The Birds, and they would draw the scenes. And this guy was at our school doing projects when he was like 80 years old. So and those are like guys who made it, out of Germany and into Hollywood, and then do some real work with great directors. um, and I was like, okay, then now who's doing now the contemporary stuff, like Star Wars and new movies that come out. And I stumbled across some of the guys that do concept art to this day, basically, and they were also one of the pioneers, like Sparth, like Ryan Church, like um, uh, what's his name, Ian. I call I
Ian
forget his name.
McQueen.
Uh, no, I think McQueen was the very old school by there, but there's another Ian that he did the concept art on the Mandalorian, and he's also an older guy, but his art is really great. So those guys, I came across them in the early 2000s, and I looked at the art, and I had one or two books from them, that I ordered from the US. And I was looking at the art, and I had no fucking clue how they did it. I was like, is this acrylic? Is this markers? I don't know. And what it was is it was digital art already, but I had no clue about digital art. So I figured that out, and I went online, and I bought an Intuos 3 at the time, 2005, and I then I tried to figure out how to draw on an Intuos 3, and nobody in the whole art school in Stuttgart had a Wacom tablet at that time. So I was the only one. So nobody could tell me shit on how to do it. I was like, uh, I remember there was a teacher who taught illustration, and I would go to him and say, I have a graphic tablet now. And he would say, great. And I said, yeah, but how do I do stuff? And he was like, I have no clue. I do it, by hand. So that was hard because you didn't have YouTube yet, so you could not just look it up. So it was a long process, because I approached, I tried to paint with a Wacom for like 2 3 years, and it was terrible. It was just, I could not do what I was able to do analog, with hand drawing and analog colors. I would not be able to do anything good for like at least 2 3 years, because if you look at some stuff, early stuff from Ryan Church, for example, like he did for the Star Wars second trilogy, you can't just look at that stuff in a book and say, "Yeah, I'm going to reproduce that." No, it's too hard to do. It's you need to reverse engineer the whole method, and that's pretty hard to do it on your own.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And speaking of like, not having YouTube back then, like, if you get so lucky back then to find like a random DeviantArt poster or some other, like, I don't know, Just forum websites were super popular back then, and you find some tutorial post about something like how to set up and just do stuff with the tablet was just was like hitting the jackpot. It's not like there's literally tutorial for anything on YouTube. Like I've
Yes.
recently started learning Blender, and for every little meta detail there's like an extensive 20 to 30 minute tutorial, and it's awesome, you know from making cables, buttons, anything.
No, it's definitely. I mean, the problem you have right now, if you go on YouTube, is a completely different one. And that is you have almost too much stuff and you have to separate the good stuff from the bad. And if you're a beginner, that's sometimes hard to do because you can't listen to everybody, obviously. And yeah, so there's that. And also, as we know, in programs like Photoshop, there's like a million ways to do the same shit, So what's the best way? There's people who like to colorize with like multiply layers. I think it's stupid, but there's tons of people who do it on YouTube like that, and they make tutorials like that and have a million followers. And then of course you, you can't easily decide which person you're listening to.
Yeah, definitely. And well, just not to get sidetracked from the course of the podcast, let me just jump back to the next question. Sorry for that stutter. Which is all right. Of course, we talked about like how you started. You first went into graphic design, but then you became an illustrator and concept artist. But speaking of what you're doing right now, what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on right now? And tell us about your experience from the start of it until now.
Well, I'm afraid I have no main branch. I'm one of these weird guys, as you mentioned it before in the introduction, I teach at art school for a bachelor's and master's degree in product design drawing, that is realistic drawing. But of course, that's only you only do that like one day a week or something like that, few hours. And then what I do is I do a mixture of illustration, like classic illustration for um, institutions and stuff like learning materials, that kind of stuff. So it's I would say it's modern illustration, but it's still it's book illustration. I did magazine work. Oh, this is the new VR, and then you draw, a guy with a VR glasses, or you draw some ancient architecture for a story in a magazine, stuff like that. So I'm all kinds of stuff. One of my contractors is a bigger company that you might know is Zeiss, which they make the glasses and the oculars, and so I help them develop microscopes. So these huge, operational microscopes that you have that look like spaceships. So I have to draw that, in working together with engineers, and they would give me data, and I will have to make suggestions on how the thing would look, because they have no idea how it could look. So that's where the product design comes in. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and a little bit you see it also in my Instagram, where I will sometimes have a completely different style, and then the next post will be a completely different style. So that's I find that interesting. And as a graphic designer and as an illustrator, you need to, I think, have more than one trick. Unlike a concept artist, if you're a concept artist, which I also from time to time do, there is some a certain style that you wouldn't consider it, that's concept art, right? So even though it's not a very distinct style, and concept artists are not all the same, but you will almost never see a colored line drawing as a concept art. That's really rare to see. It's more of like you have the typical um, pseudo computer CGI like realistic, photo bashed, and stuff that looks like a shot from a game or a movie. That's what you think about when you think concept art, even though technically it could be anything, right? But that's not what you see. So yeah, I do all this stuff at the same time, basically. So I yeah,
No,
last
that's
year I did some microscopes, did some magazines, did some sponsored work for some painting programs, tutorial stuff, whatever comes along. So, and I'm glad it works out, because there were different times when I would work just for a company doing graphic design, and I got really bored the shit out of, because I'm not that person. I need some kind of an artistic freedom. If you just give me documents to design all day, I'm going to lose my mind. So
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And it's kind of funny because actually, my yesterday's guest on the podcast, I mean, of course, I haven't uploaded his episode yet, and I'm not gonna drop his name now, just not to make a spoiler. But he was also a generalist like you, and he was actually kind of successful, which is actually just counterintuitive to the meta of the art
it
world right
is,
now.
it is,
You know?
and I'm aware of that, because I'm not nowhere near, having a lot of money or anything. But I'm always saying, at least I do what I like to do. So that's, yeah, for sure it is counterintuitive, because if you focus on one thing and you're really good at that thing, it's much easier to grow an audience, for sure. Yeah.
All right. And speaking of like, your workflow and stuff like that, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a project? Like, how does the structure of the pipeline from start to finish of your, like, flow chart of your, like, process looks like? Could you please explain that to us?
Sure. I would say that it depends a little bit on the project and on the the style that you have in mind for the solution. So if you're shooting for a line drawing as a final product, you would maybe approach it differently than if you it is a concept art. So in the free concept arty stuff that I show a lot on my accounts, um, it's kind of a chaotic approach, because I, I I really think a lot about an image. I in my mind, I of course you need to generate the idea. So um, and coming up with the idea is a whole process in itself. How do you do it? I like to do it, not look at anything, and then just generate it out of my mind, and then make a quick sketch, maybe a grayscale sketch or just a line drawing. And even I do it a lot by hand, just on paper with a pencil. And I have a scanner right here, and I scan it, just to archive it. And because I think that an idea, it needs to work in a simple fashion. If it doesn't, then it's probably not a good idea. So, and it's what I also tell my students: if you like have an idea, and in a simple fashion, if you put it down on paper, it doesn't look good, you should not think, it probably will look good once I put 20 hours into it and it has all the details, because usually that's not what happens. If the idea is not good in a primitive fashion, then it's also not good as a final product. So for me, it needs to, I feel that out by doing just little sketches until I feel that I have a really nice idea. And then, of course, this idea will not be very very intricate yet, but I can see it in my mind already what it's going to be. And sometimes I even post, the process stuff. If you scroll back in my Instagram, sometimes you see me posting like um, a final image, and then the next, you flip over, you see the initial pencil drawing. And a lot of people don't get it, because they think, oh, it's a shitty pencil drawing. And I sometimes will even write that, as the comment. I would say, I'm not a shitty pencil drawing. But of course, the artist guys get it, because that's the way you think up stuff. If you don't just want to copy stuff that is out there already. So for me, it's critical to isolate myself from from stuff that might corrupt my ideas, and then I come up with something, and then if my idea needs a nice tree, then I might go on the internet and look up how nice trees look like, and then but I don't want the internet to dictate me what I draw. So I want it to come from like within my own, at first. And then of course, if you start uh, doing the final piece in Photoshop, or whatever program you choose, I like to then have a more chaotic approach, because then I know I have the idea, and when I have the idea, I get, in a way, I get my freedom back. So then I can experiment with shapes and colors, and then I find something, sometimes in a pretty chaotic way, that will then make the final image. But the final image, you will still see that it's still the same vision as in the initial little pencil drawing.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, actually, I was checking your Instagram as well. The thing you said is kind of true. You had the pencil sketches and the final version at the same post. I mean, it usually when people try to post stuff like that, they first post the final product, then they add uh, the secondary stuff next. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of like a better strategy in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, you're
I have
definitely
also done
right.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's a better strategy because you cannot persuade anybody with that sketch. But I just find there's real value in primitive stuff.
Yes. Absolutely. And the composition, the perspective, like these are like, if you don't know the basics, you can't even do it basically, like it doesn't matter. But I mean, as you said, only the artist would get it. And social medias, especially something like Instagram, is brutally just, superficial.
Yes, it
So
is.
yeah, if you can't catch someone's attention for like a half a second, it's gone. They'll move on to the next one, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing that I'm completely aware of that. So as a designer, I understand what people want to see. It's just that I don't want to do it all the time. So if you want to be really successful with on Instagram, what you do is you do nice pencil drawings of cats, and then you do one every day, and you will get a million followers.
No,
That's
actually, I've thought about that a lot. Like, what's the most technically speaking, technically the most appealing, and how fast. If you wanted to go 0 to 100 real fast on social media, regardless of whether you like it or not, just make drawings of pretty girls with pretty colors and bright
or
colors.
that,
That's
yeah, or
that's
that.
it,
Sure, sure.
literally. So you're gonna grow so fast.
Yeah, but then I don't, you have to want to be this guy to keep doing
Yeah,
that, because then you're this guy. And then if you post a spaceship, everybody, then everybody unfollows you.
yeah.
So then you're the nice girl guy. So, and that's
By the
not,
way, there's nothing wrong if you want to keep posting drawings of nice girls with pretty
no,
colors.
for
It's
sure.
fine. But
It's
just I'm
fine.
just saying technical in terms of technicality of
No,
like how social media is. But yeah, I mean, as long as you're having fun with what you're doing, I mean, you probably shouldn't care or don't care by default of like whether how much followers or stuff or the statistics of your work basically, because as
yeah,
long as you're happy, that's enough.
that's fine, and you don't need to be an artist in that sense. But for me, it's like, if you're an artist, you don't analyze what's the best and then do it. You do what speaks to you,
Yeah,
because otherwise it's going to work, but it's not an artistic approach.
yeah, definitely. And all right, let's change the subject up a bit.
Okay.
What was the first art job paycheck you ever got, and what was it for, and how did you feel at the time when you got it?
First art job,
Art job
like,
paycheck, yeah, but first paycheck you ever
okay,
gotten through the way of art, basically, something
yeah,
like
I
that.
remember that. And that was like every art job, like every first art job you would get is vitamin B is involved. So you guys say that, do you know what that means, vitamin B?
Vitamin B? No, I'm sorry, I'm
We
kind
say
of
that in
lost.
Germany, and what it means is you have connections.
But why B? Is that a German
Yeah,
because of a German word?
yeah, because the German word for connections starts with a B. That's right. You would say vitamin C in
Oh
English.
yeah.
So
No,
vitamin
just
connections.
out of curiosity, what's the word?
The word is Beziehung.
Beziehung.
Beziehungen.
Beziehungen.
Connections.
All
Yeah.
right, we learned
Yeah.
some German today.
Yeah.
All right, I'm listening.
No. So Yeah, I was 16 when that happened. So it was in the 90s, and there was a guy who was a he was a professor at a university for new media, for the new stuff like computers, the internet. Internet has just basically started. I think at that time, so nobody had a clue about that stuff. He would be like um, teaching teaching young students who would become teachers themselves, in public schools, and he would teach them about computers. So that was his thing. So he was the guy for the new media. So he wrote a book, and he wanted to publish the book, and to make the book a little bit more attractive, he wanted some illustrations for the book. And this guy, he was a friend of the family basically. So, and he knew I could draw. And so he was like, okay, give this kid a chance basically to illustrate the book, do like 10, 12 drawings for the book. And you know if it turns out well, he would take it. If it doesn't, then well, too bad. So I did that, and then that turned out to be okay for my age and the time and everything. And those were pencil drawings. And I got paid a little bit. Like, of course, you don't get paid like a huge check, but that was not the thing. I was stoked that I would do a illustrate a book that would actually people would see it, because that's kind of a big deal when you're that young. So that was the first thing.
All right, interesting. And all right, let's jump into some general questions that I've prepared for you to talk about. And all right, first things first, it's been exactly 32 minutes now that we've been talking on this podcast. And throughout this 32 minutes, we've said the word meta like I think 7 or 8 times. All right. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because I want to ask you about the metas in art and how usually, like, in today's art world, like, the metas are not really specific. And in terms of, like, culture for artists, like, you see, like, I think, as you said the previous before we started recording, that's, there's not sometimes there are not really clear cut metas to follow, and it sometimes could cause problems. Could you please elaborate on that?
Well, it's I think it's kind of a difficult subject, because in order for a meta to work or to really guide you, I think you need to be very aware of what you're doing. For example, you could and a lot of great artists have metas. If you like look at Picasso, the whole cubist style thing, it's like a meta in itself. And God only knows how he came up with that, to draw people in rectangular shapes and stuff like this. This is like a filter in your mind, and that's, I think, how you should perceive any meta, is like, for you, a way to develop something, um, an idea, and then that idea becomes it influences the whole process basically, and therefore also your final result. And people do it subconsciously, but I wouldn't call that a real meta, because if you do it subconsciously, you just imitate something. You just, oh, this looks good, I'm doing it like this because does it like this, and this guy is really successful. So then you don't really have a game, a real your own meta. So your own meta, to develop it, I think it's kind of that's part of your job as an artist, and it's what makes you interesting. And you can see that in good artists, when you look at the development. Like, there's a, there's one meta, and then for example, in the early days, it was just like, oh, we're drawing in Photoshop, and it looks pretty good. It looks like a real oil painting, and I can do layers, so I have an advantage over the original oil painting. So it was like a technical thing. And then people started, okay, to realize that this is easy, and this is kind of there's more to digital art than that. And then you have people developing shape languages like Andrew Jones, like he would do a live event and then listen to techno music and then do shapes and do a spacey scene, and you could call that a meta for sure. Yeah. And then, but also in other styles, you will, I think if you do a lot of Photoshop, what digital art, you will realize that in a program, you think completely different about your process than you do when you do it on paper. So, and for me, that's part of the whole thing, because there's uh, I would say there's a meta to your approach. For example, I do dark sci-fi stuff, and I like to interpret it in that way, just as an example. Um, and then, but there's another thing, another meta, and that is the technical part. That is how you translate that through your layers in Photoshop, and and the technical choices that you make will influence the outcome strongly. It's if you work a lot with clipping masks, it will show. If you work a lot with overlay layers, it will show, right? All of that stuff matters in a sense, and it becomes your style. And you don't have that on paper, because on paper it's just this brush and then this color, and then you mix it, so you're much more limited, and there's much less room, I think, to develop a technical meta, so to speak.
All right. And let me also tell the listeners and or the viewers of the podcast something interesting. And on I think like about it was about like a month ago that I went to an exhibition that was held on in Istanbul, and I think it still will go on until the 25th of March of 2022. I It's in Para Museum of Istanbul. I will post it on the stories of the podcast. When I upload this episode, so you don't guys have to worry about the details. I don't have it in my head right now. But basically, there was this artist that I've been following for a long time, and I really liked her works. And one of her pieces was going to be showed and exhibited there. So I went there, and of course, I didn't just go there just to see one piece. I started to check out other pieces, and one particular piece that really took my eyes and attention was the piece you're going to see, I think, in the the corner here in the time lapse in the YouTube section. Sorry for audio listeners. I'll post it in the first introduction post of the Instagram uh, post of today's episode as well, so you guys don't have to worry. It's basically a retro sci-fi version of the future of Constantinople, Istanbul. And there's this like Hagia Sophia mosque in like a futuristic version. I kind of liked it. It looked cool. And here's a weird thing: I checked everywhere, but there was no proper introduction of artists on the side of pieces. And like the only way I could find it, artist of that work was your art name bind, I think, at the bottom of the painting, like in like a really low hue type of
Yeah,
color.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna put it in Google and see what comes up. And I found a page, fortunately, and now we're talking. Now, right, first things first. First, I want to ask you, how did you came up with the idea, or what happened? Was this like a commission or something? And the second part of that is, how did they contact you that they wanted to, just kind of put it on exhibition, and how did the process go? Just the whole story, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a weird one, because I was surprised by that too, because there was a guy writing an email to me by the name of Osman something, a guy from Turkey, and he was like, "Yeah, we're having an exhibition here in Istanbul, and I came across that work of yours, and I want to put it in the exhibition. And what do I need to do to?" um, so, and I was like, I didn't know about any exhibition, I was not aware. So he explained the whole thing, that it's about, Byzantinism, and how it influences pop culture, and all of that. So I found it interesting, and of course I would agree, because why wouldn't I? It's the piece was not, to answer that question, the piece was not done for the exhibition. piece was done, and it's not a commission either. So it was done just for myself, out of my self interest, because I come across photography once in a while, and I like photography as an inspiration for art, because photography works a little bit differently, and it doesn't give you a style because it's just reality, right? So of course there's some tricks in photography too, but it doesn't give you a clear style. So you're kind of doing the translating uh, by yourself. So a lot of times I would even look at bad photography, snapshots, and then see something in there, and then just take a little part of it, and then make that the subject of an image that has almost nothing to do with it, but for me that's an inspiration. So and that in that case, that was, I think, a distant shot of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And then I for me it was like, okay, why not um, translate that into a futuristic scene and then change things up. And then I played around with this in the office, and I came up with a simple black and white picture that looked appealing to me. So then that's why I did the image. It's not a commission like many pieces that I show on Instagram, because what it is like, a lot of projects I do that I mentioned, like product design for companies like Zeiss, you cannot show that because you're under NDA, right? So and also, what use would it be for me to show off, uh, uh, microscope designs on Instagram? Um, I don't want to go there necessarily career wise. That will never happen. That is not a path. So you kind of also show up what interests you the most, which is what you will see. So a lot of stuff on Instagram is that I show off is done in my free time, or is partially, a commission. And if it is and there's something attached, I will also mention that. So in this image, yeah, it was just out of interest, and then they put it into the exhibition, and it was interesting because this guy, then he ran me through the process, and he said, listen, we can pay you this much, for the image as a license fee, and it will be in the catalog which they send me over. I have it already here, which is a nice, really thick book. So I didn't even know the scope of the exhibition, but now that I have the catalog, it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, I have to say. So
And here's the thing, something that have been like intriguing me, like especially since like 2 minutes ago, because I just realized something. I've always like I'm on a lookout to research and figure out basically how social media and this stuff usually works. How we get in contact and jobs work. When usually the way they work is you use the correct hashtags and you maybe enter like an online art competition or something, a niche art competition, and someone finds you that way. But I checked the hashtags on both your art station and Instagram of the same post, and your art they're a bit different. Like on art station, you don't have anything. Maybe, oh yeah, do you have Neo Constantinople and Middle East? That's it. That's all it could relate to, like Hagia Sophia or Turkey. And for Instagram, here's the interesting thing: you also added the Neo Constantinople, hashtag, and I checked. I was like, oh, maybe that's a popular hashtag. And imagine on the whole platform of social media of Instagram, how many times it was used? Twice.
okay,
And I,
yeah,
I was kind of amazed. How did they find it?
I don't know.
That's yeah. That's something that's really interesting. I'm glad that it happened because I managed
Yeah,
to find your stuff and we're talking. Like I'm not complaining, but it's kind of interesting
yeah,
when you think
no,
about
for
it.
sure. It is interesting, and I like to use hashtags very chaotically. I like, okay, this, that, and the other, and sometimes because sometimes I blank out. I'm done with work. It's late, and I post it, and the last thing you do is you write the hashtags, and I'm like, what the fuck should I write about this? And I was like, okay, Constantinople, this, that, spaceship, and and I don't really have a hashtag game. The only thing I know is that on Instagram you need a lot of hashtags to be able to get somewhere. On ArtStation it's completely different, because on ArtStation you can do almost without hashtags, because they have their categories set up already, and you're already showing up in the feed, and it's not that many people like in Instagram. You're not competing with like the pretty girls and all of that, you know.
Yeah, I get it, but still, like, here's the thing. I mean, you probably know this as well. And a lot of people are listening to the podcast. They probably know it as well. But a lot of top companies in the world they have talent scouts all the time online, looking for potential people to hire or commission from Netflix, Marvel, Sony, like all of them. They have and if your art is actually niche and good and polished and quality, and it shows that the person who's doing that, working on that method, that subject we spoke about earlier, they will contact you. Like, yeah, it's not like fairy tale. It actually happens. So,
Yes.
and here's the thing, here's the kicker. The way they usually find the, people to commission is through hashtags, correct hashtags, because, like, for example, imagine a studio wants to hire like a 3D modeler from Mix, all right? They'll go through those hashtags. They're not going to just randomly waste their times on different, like, just all the content on Instagram. They try to
Yeah.
optimize their process. So to optimize their process, they use hashtags. And actually, yours was an exception that I've heard by now. Maybe, of course, I haven't heard that much stories, as I would like to, just assume I should. But yeah, since you didn't use the correct hashtags, or not even popular hashtags, and still got the result, I mean, it's kind of fascinating. It makes you
Yeah,
think, actually, about the whole.
it does. It does. But I have to say, there's of course coincidences, and also it's kind of hard to say, because then say you use a popular hashtag, now you're one in a million, you know. So, and that's not so good, because
Yeah.
uh, yeah, then you're kind of anonymous again. So I like to at least throw in some hashtags which I made them up almost, you know, so that they're not so common. And then yeah, but also, you have to admit that I'm not doing it, I'm not having an online presence for that long, because I didn't need one, and I was, at other companies employed before, so I joined the game really late. So and I'm not highly successful either, I don't have, like thousands and thousands of followers or anything. So I think you, at the end of the day, some of your pieces, will make all of your success. Like 99% of, or 90% of your content does nothing, it just evaporates. And then you have one piece that really speaks to people, and you cannot anticipate what that piece will be. And all of a sudden, it's like you get reshared, you get, people share it, people like it, and you get this influx of followers. And I think that's the thing you need to. And so at the end of the day, in a way, quality will still play its part. It's just very hard to only make it through quality. that's
Yeah,
that's
that's an interesting point, actually. And who? All right, let's jump into it. I just have to give a warning. The next question is usually what I heard by other guests that is considered one of the hardest questions of the podcast. Don't worry, it's
okay.
nothing personal.
Bring it.
All right. Who are your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most? I think you can see why that's a hard question.
Yeah, it is. And I would say that I don't have many, because I don't consider myself ever to be a fan, of somebody. I might be a fan of their work or like their work, but it's kind of for me. Uh, and you also see that, because if you look how many people I follow, the answer is pretty much almost nobody. And that's not because I hate people, it's because I think it's a it's kind of a dishonest practice to go on Instagram and say, yeah, I follow 10,000 people, I like them. That's bullshit. You don't like 10,000 people, you like maybe 30 people, and then the rest of them, you follow them because you want something back. And that, I think, or just for uh, I wanted to be honest. If I follow you, then that means I really want to see what's up, and I expect the same from my followers. So, um, where was I getting at?
The artists that you really admire
Yeah,
and
the
have
artists
inspired
that
you.
that you like. So naturally, I don't, and I think, one of the, to preface that answer a little bit, is that um there's something problematic with trying to emulate your favorite artist, and that is you become a cheap copy of that guy. And I fear that a lot. I don't want to be that. So therefore, there's people I admire and that I maybe have been following, not really following, but on and off. Um, so the first guy that left an impression, or the first two guys that left an impression on me, were guys like Giger, the alien designer, right? Or I mentioned before, Masamu Nishiro, who did like sci-fi, Japanese sci-fi manga comics, right? So we would draw robots and stuff, and I tried to emulate the work, but I still wouldn't consider myself a fan of the guy. I was just really liking one part of his work a lot, and then that spoke to me. So I would say those guys for sure. And then sometimes, you get somebody who is really not doing what you're doing. uh, there's a photographer that I came across in the early 2000s. What was his name? He's doing realistic photography, and I think he's a New Yorker. um, I think his let me look this up. His first name is Joel. uh, Yeah, Joel Sternfeld is his
Mm.
name. So this guy is like a Cartier-Bresson type of photographer, right? Which is another great guy, of course, that everybody knows. Who did, 100 years ago, did all the great, you know press photography style, all over the world, basically. So I consider Joel Sternfeld to be a little bit like him. He just sees something in reality, and he frames it so perfectly, in a photograph, that it's just, he doesn't need any post production or anything. He just sees art in daily life, and it's really awesome, I think. Because that's, when I go back to what I said earlier, how I like this simple photography as a source of inspiration. Because it's kind of unfiltered, and if you see it, and you have all the freedom to interpret it any way you want. There's no artist who already interpreted it for you. So of course, in terms of his photography, yeah, he framed it for you for sure. Yeah, he thought about it. But then you're still free to interpret. Um, it's not like the other guy, uh, Richter, or what his name is, who would do the serial photography, or you see Media Markt, the what is it called, um, supermarket shelves, organized perfectly, or stuff like this, where there's very little room for interpretation. It's just, kind of a um, play on shapes, and very serial, very binary designs. So those guys I like. But a lot of times, I'm sure I like the work of people I don't even know their names. And I also, I believe in this. You need to find your own stuff, your own style. So that's, I like digital artists. One of the earliest, of course, like Sparth. Uh, but those guys are famous, and then they put out a book, and it's great. But it only brings you so far, because the stuff you see in there is already highly stylized. It's highly developed by them. And you kind of, in a way, a book by Sparth, to me, is not a good source of inspiration, because the stuff that is in there is already kind of perfect. You can't really do it better. You can just make a worse copy of it, and then what?
Yeah, exactly. And funny that you mentioned Sparf because he's actually one of my biggest inspirations in terms of uh, digital art as well. I even actually this last summer, before the whole inflation crisis in Turkey, before the dollar wasn't so expensive, I actually bought one of his brush packs and model packs, and I to this day I love using them. They're so because literally, if you could sum up my interests when it comes to digital art, I could just say Sparf, because what I like science fiction, post-apocalyptic stuff, makes robots, spaceships, and buildings, and just environment design, and Sparf does all of that in a niche way.
That's right. Yeah. He does it in his own way, and he still manages to have huge success with that, and to be kind of like a figurehead in that space, because and that's why I like to look at his stuff. It's not so much to be like um to try to imitate him, but you can see there's a certain kind of thinking outside the box in some people's work, and he's one of them. Where you approach stuff differently, because if you look at stuff from him like 20 years ago, it's completely different than the stuff that is like 10 years later. And that's always a good sign to me, because you can't just stagnate and do the same shit all over like for 20 years. It becomes old, especially considering how young digital art is.
Yeah, exactly. And all right, let's jump into another question and subject. What are you working on right now that you can tell us about? And I mean, of course, if there's no NDA involved in the process as well.
Yeah. Yeah. um right now there's right now I just have because I managed to finish last year with pretty much no projects open, so that's good. I will have um one two projects already that will start in January. But yeah, those the stuff that you will actually see from me is pretty much now for the first part of 2022 is going to be I think a backlog of private work, like more sci-fi images that I have some good ideas that I have this backlog on my hard drive that is ever growing, like any artist. But I'm trying to finish some work there, and then some stuff I'm actually excited about, and that I couldn't manage to finish last year. Um, so that will be yeah, will be the next projects. I'm talking to a game studio right now for doing a indie game project, but yeah, unfortunately can't say too much about it. It's not because of NDA; it's just because they haven't outlined really the project to me yet. So I don't even know if I will end up taking it. That's but yeah, that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty much yeah. You will see more of my private experiments in the next few weeks, I guess.
All right, awesome. And the next question is, what area beside the area you're working on right now, which is of course in the field of art, if you want to speak generally, would you be interested to explore and learn in the future, given if you had enough time, when you had some free time in the future or something, Or let me rephrase this question another way. If you had do you have any goals or ambitions in the back of your head that you've put off for a more stable time in your life? You know what I mean? And it could be something completely not related, by the way.
No, I don't. The thing is that um, I kind of put off art for some time in the past. So that's how I look at it. For me, it's like, yeah, I did some secure work. I did graphic design work, which was nice, which I learned something, and I worked with other people, worked with architects, worked with engineers, did all of that, so I know that I can do that, and that's the secure stuff. And I kind of left that behind to do what I'm doing now, and I don't plan on going back. And I don't. I'm not like, yeah, then later I will return and then be secure. I don't have these feelings at the moment. I'm just because as you get, and I'm not old by any means, but I'm older, for example, than you are. So when you reach a certain development, you think like, yeah, but what do I really want to do, because yeah, making money is fine, but if making money is your main concern and security in your job is your main concern, you're not an artist. Like, that's, in generally speaking, most likely you're not an artist, because you can't have that, all of that, you need some to take some risks to work in art, because else you really you might be you might be an illustrator and have a secure job and do educational books for 30 years. But I would debate that that's an artist, that it's um, I try to not have this need for security right now in my life, so that I can be, in a sense, free to do the art I really want to put out.
Yeah, that's actually such a smart way to look at it.
Also, a smart way to get broke, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I think I assume for someone with the skills, for someone with the skill set that you have, I don't think it should be that hard to find commissions or work, like, even freelance. So you kind of, I think, can execute what you're doing right now if you have that kind of safety net of like having an actual resume or something behind you that you can switch back
Yeah,
anytime. Yeah,
yeah.
just need to mention that important note on that.
No, but that's. I mean, I have people that write me on ArtStation or on Instagram and say, "Hey, can you? How do I do that? I want to get into art, and do you have a tip for me?" And it's not like it happens, by the hundreds. And of course, because I think my following is not reflective really of my work that I do with some companies. But yeah, there's no good answer to that. There's no easy answer. You have to be willing to struggle is my answer, I think, because I'm still, in a way, I'm still struggling. I'm still, I'm still not, like, I can't buy a house from my art, like, far from it. So, but I think you have to have your expectations in check. If you want to make a lot of money, you're not becoming an artist. That's not how that works. So it kind of, you need to really want to do it, I think. And you can't just do it for some goal that is somewhere in the future. I think that's stupid to do, especially in art.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I've been like, actually thinking about recently a lot. Like, it's not a new thing for me, but I've always like, think about stuff like repeatedly just to understand them better. And I recently, I mean, I think I mentioned that I recently started to heavily learn Blender, and I've been having a blast. Like, I can easily not do any fun activities I used to do before and just work on it. And here's the thing. I got put in the position of being a beginner at something, at a skill, so I can understand the point of view of a beginner and at how intimidating it is at the first and beginning. And here's, I can actually give an analogy right now and explain it away. Imagine, by the way, sorry for audio listeners, I'm kind of trying to explain it on the camera. So yeah, if you might not understand what I'm saying, it's because of that. So imagine you're at the top of a building, and at the bottom there's like a mattress that you can jump on, fall on. All right. And if you say that on top of the building is the starting point of your art journey and learning and everything, and the mat and dropping on the mattress is like, getting to where you like technically you always have to keep going, but just bear with me. That and the jumping on the mattress is like, where you want to be. There's two major ways in my opinion. One is like, take a course, start slowly, and it's like doing like a really smooth transitioning, like, obstacle course to down. It might take a little bit of time. It's less struggly, and you have a mentor with you. Or there's another method that I really like and enjoy, and I've been doing it for most of my life or anything. Imagine, like, all this, like, pipes and stuff in surrounding construction buildings, like those metal and pipe. You can just jump down and you keep bruising and breaking every single one of your bone while on your way down, and you get to the mattress. And the reason I made the analogy is because every single one of those pipes and metals you hit by is, like, learning bit by bit from different tutorials. Like, for example, you set a goal for yourself. I want to make a spaceship in Blender, right? So what do I need to learn? How to work with the user interface, then how to work with objects. What do I need? How to make a mesh? How to then later make UV texture maps? How to texture? What are material nodes? Then when you understand those stuff, it gets more meta. So you learn Blender through the lens of your scope of, like, goal. So it's kind of like that. It's, if you're actually motivated enough and are passionate, it can actually become faster to get to where you want. But if you're not, if you need like a, but if it's absolutely fine if you want to go the other route and just that's actually kind of technically, I think, in my opinion, long term more sustainable in some sense. Like to take it the long term slow and just learn everything bit by bit. Like fundamentally, it might be a little bit boring, but in general, I think it's a good idea as well. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, the second method, as I explained, has been working for me, and I think, I hope the way I explained it kind of could illuminate some stuff for you in terms of learning. And do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I think you develop your own. Everybody should, or in art, it's so the approaches are so different that you need to develop your own theory of what you just did. You know, for you, it's jumping down a building, getting hit by all these, obstacles. For somebody else, it might be a different analogy, but I think it's all. Um, it has something in common at the end is that you need to get those influences and maybe be hit by them or maybe just also search for them sometimes in order to just make yourself better at what you want. So um, and and it's not easy, by the way, to figure out what you want as an artist. That's I think that's one of the hard things to figure out because a lot of students haven't figured that out at all, and yeah, it's no wonder they haven't because I hadn't done that either at the time. And I think your goal, your matrix at the bottom of the building is not stagnant, it's moving, in that sense. So your goal changes also over time. So as you get hit by those obstacles, your the point where you land might change.
Yeah, definitely. That's like also a good way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, for like, I think basically what I explained would work mostly for beginning phases of, like, learning something, in my opinion. But I mean, yeah, what I said is kind of true. Like, if you don't lock down on the niche that you really like, yeah, that could also become a real big problem because I used to suffer from that a lot, and I kind of sometimes still do. And yeah, that's a whole nother topic that, to be honest, I don't think I'm still a student in that, so I don't think I can give any tips aside the fact that just try as many different things as possible when it comes to mediums from subjects, and try to even analyze your past, see what you really liked and got you excited when you were a kid. Was it the robot cartoons? Was it, I don't know, history topics? Was it mythology stuff? Like, what was it? Like, try to stuff like that. Studies like that could be also helpful to find your niche.
Yeah, the thing is that I think what people or beginners need to understand is that there's if you do something right, there's no real waste of time. The only waste of time is you just not struggling and then trying to trying to because what we all strive at to be, and that is not only in art but also in every aspect of life. You start that when you're a kid by imitation. So how do you learn a language? You imitate, right? And then you end up it ends up coming together. And with art it's the same. You imitate first, but you can't imitate forever because then you're just an imitator, you're not an artist, right? So You have to imitate for as long as it gives you something to learn. And when it stops, you have to break away from the imitation game and do something else. And whatever you do, you need to struggle with that to learn something again. And it's not a real problem that you don't know yet what you end up wanting to do. It's a problem that you don't do it the right way, because then you didn't learn anything. Because if you let, and that's a good example. I learned about layouts in art school. So I learned how to lay out a magazine by a guy who did like magazine work for like 25 or more years, and he was the art director of big magazines. So he would explain to me how he would, put on a wall all these, all the small, like miniature layouts of the entire magazine, and look at it like a storyboard, and it would make sense to him, and he would say, oh, this is the story, and it starts with a big headline, and then you have a picture on this side, and then the picture laps over to the next side, and then you turn the page, and then that's what happens. So it's a real composition aspect in there. And the rules by which you compose are not so far removed from the rules in which you compose an image. it's it's the same rules, just they apply to different media. If you can lay out a page in a magazine well, that also helps you to lay out an image well, and it helps you to be a better photographer, and so on and so forth. So if you do something right, you can always translate it into another area again.
Yeah, that's actually a good point as well. And well, we've reached the final question of the podcast, which is like appropriately called final question section slash section, called final words. I'm going to explain what it means. Basically, imagine you have a limited amount of time, and in that limited amount of time, you could say any message or messages from you, a human, to another human being. And those human beings are people who are going to listen to this in the future to this episode of the podcast. Like it could be someone who's listening to the podcast and they've reached the like 1 hour and 12 minute mark of this episode and are listening to us now. Maybe in a week in future, months in future, years, decades, who knows. And so in that situation, like the thing about this question is that I never tell people to prepare for anything because I want the raw answers that pop into their head. So
Yeah.
what are your answers?
Okay. Well, the decade thing is kind of like out there, so I don't know if we can get there, but I think the point where we just ended up at is pretty good. That you need to you need to get something from the art. That's like a general thing, that no matter what you do, um, you have to question. I think a little bit your motivation. If your motivation maybe is to please, and that might be other people, and that might be when you're a kid your mom, and then later your friends, and then later on your contractor. But um, that's it's crucial to understand like your own motivation as an artist, I think, because if that motivation is not the right motivation, then maybe maybe you should break away from it. Because what we said before, how do you get something out of it, how do you get better? And I think with the wrong motivation, you kind of always take a risk of not developing. So let's say I found a way to please my boss, right? So all I have to do now is to repeat that over and over, and to keep pleasing him, and to keep getting paychecks. But it's kind of a stalemate. It doesn't really make me any better at one point. So even though it might be comfortable, it's maybe not the right thing to pursue after a certain point. Like that's something I think that has also been through our conversation the past hour. That is, and it's something that really I try to live it. Is that what is not exciting for me as an artist? Of course, that I'm not trying to pursue that, because I think that if you're not excited about something, you will not do your best work. And it's kind of not worth it being an artist if you're not going to try to do your best work.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good note to end this episode on. I mean, yeah, in the end, if you're not actually like getting feeling fulfilled what you're doing, I mean, I'm just, not just talking about art. There's really not the point, and I know it sounds like one of those cheesy motivational Instagram posts, but I mean, after all, it's true. I mean, you kind of have to at some point even experience it for a little bit on a really minuscule level to get it. But yeah, if it doesn't actually like make you feel fulfilled what you do, um it's not really easy to get to develop at it and get great, you reach that greatness that your soul desires, or kind of like that. I don't know.
See, I would say I would agree with you. It's kind of a cheesy motivational speech, but that speech often gets, just wrapped around anything, any job. Yeah, you have to do this if you want to be a great engineer and this and that. But I think, especially in being an artist, this is it's kind of like, at least it's true there, because being an artist is too hard not for you not to be fulfilled with it, in a sense. Would you want to do that? You're not getting rich, not getting famous most of the time. So why do it if doing it does not give you anything?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's actually make you think sometimes. All right, so thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It was a total blast. It's one of those rare episodes that it just passed the 60-minute mark. And
Hey,
yeah. Where can people contact you if they had any question? Is your Instagram account okay if I put it in the captions?
yeah, for sure. On Instagram, it's just my initial with my name. It's Baumhauer.
Hmm?
And also, if you search for Bind, the name, um, like my artist handle, you will also find my ArtStation profile and also my Instagram. I'm pretty sure. And if as I said before, I don't like have a million people following me. So if you if you want to know something from me, chances are I actually will answer you.
All right, awesome. And it's bind with BYND. I'll put the our station and Instagram in the captions, so you can
Yeah,
everyone who's listening or had a question, they can easily contact you. And thanks again for coming by, and thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened or watched this episode. I hope you learned something useful, and we managed to provide some sort of value to you. And if you had any questions or critiques, please leave them in the comments on Castbox, YouTube, or Instagram, or you can just send me in the DMs of the podcast page. I'll read them all and I'll respond to them all as well. Well, till next episode, take care, everyone. Bye.
bye bye.